Hey everyone, how's it going? Azrin here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to today's Learn Gujarati with Me podcast episode and YouTube video. Today I'd like to answer a question that came through on YouTube in one of the comments, and it's about the mindu. So the mindu is a dot that you'll see on top of a lot of words. Let me share my screen and show you an example. So if we look at something like, here we go. So if you look, for example, at, here we go. This is the word shu. Shu. S-H-U. There we go. Shu, it means what? Now listen carefully to how I'm pronouncing it. This is shu. Shu. Notice it's very, very nasal. It's almost like if I plug my nose, I've never tried this, but let's see what happens. If I plug my nose, shu. It's actually almost impossible to say because a lot of the air is going through my nose. So this mindu, this little dot, that dot is called mindu. That mindu on top just indicates nasality. Now, I'll give you another example. If I said, for example, let's type ghar ma. Ghar ma. You'll notice that mindu on top. This means in the house. So again, in theory, this is ghar ma, and it's more in your nose. Now, what happens with this mindu, this little nasal marker, is listen very carefully, if the nasal marker is on top of a vowel, like the U or an A sound, right? Shu, ghar, ma, right? When it's on top of a vowel sound, that nasality, when we're talking in regular day-to-day speech, is often just ignored. So if I just wrote it like this, shu, like this, shu, gharma, that's perfectly fine. Like that is probably how people say it when they're talking in regular day-to-day speech. And in fact, gharma with that's nasal and shu that's nasal, they pretty much sound the same, almost the same as when they're not nasal. So more often than not, when it's on top of a vowel, we are going to drop that nasal. More often than not, we're going to drop that nasality. Now, here's the thing. When we have nasal sounds don't always go directly through the nose. It's not always vowels that go through the nose. We also have nasal consonants. So the two nasal consonants that we have that we're going to work with today are the sounds N and the sounds M. So we can do a little experiment together. Take your fingers, plug your nose, and I want you to go almost like you're saying no, but you don't say the word. Go plug your nose and try it. What you'll find is you can't do it. It won't work. Oh my God, my nose feels like I want to blow my nose now. It won't work because you're blocking all the airflow out of your nose. And when you say the N letter, same with the M, by the way, N and M, those two letters, the air passes through your nose. So in Gujarati, we have some words. For example, let me give you an example here. Band. Why is it not typing? There we go. Band. Or like, yeah, band is fine. Band, right? It is spelled in English like this. Band. Band, you'll notice that there's kind of this N in here, but in the Gujarati script, we have no N. What's happening is that mindu on top, instead of being a nasal, just a random nasal vowel, it's going to become like a mini N sound. I'll give you an example with an M. If I said something like, what's a good word with a ma? If I said like, I'm going to pause for a second because I can't think of one. Let me pause the recording and come back because I can't think of one off the top of my head. Okay, here we are. This is actually a lot faster and a lot better. So if we look at some with this N sound, we're going to have andar. We have, I don't like this one. Rang, not quite. We're going to scratch this one. I don't like it. Scratch that one. But andar is very good. Mandir is very good. Palang is not so good. We're going to come back to that one. Santra is very good. So these are some examples of N. Now, how do we know that mindu on top becomes an N? How do we know? How do we know that it's andar as opposed to just like a random nasal that goes to the nose? How do we know? Well, we look at the next letter. the rather. If the next letter is a letter that uses our tongue, we're gonna make it an N. So the, that is a letter we use our tongue to pronounce. Therefore, that mindu becomes an N. Andar, mandir, no, sorry, santra. If the letter that comes after the mindu, we use our lips, it's going to become an M. So weird first word, but we'll stick with it. Number, right? Champal. Why? Because we use our lips for that sound. Number, that we use our lips for that letter, right? I don't like tambu. Let's not do that. Let's do, it's kind of a long word, but lamba choras. That's a rectangle. Why lamba? Because ba uses our lips. Lamba choras, right? If we look at some with vowels here, hati, does hati have a mindu? I'm not sure if that's right, but let's say it did. I think this is misspelled actually, but let's say it had a little mindu. This would still be hati. No change in pronunciation. Mo technically should have a nasal kind of a feel to it, but it really doesn't change much, right? Or if I said like, let's do bhes. Bhes actually has a little bit of nasality to it, actually. It's not bhes. Oh, I guess you could say bhes. Bhes. Do you hear that nasality? Bhes. That sound to it, right? Vandro is a bad example, unfortunately. Vandro is a good example, actually, of the N, because da uses our tongue. Remember, when we use our tongue on this letter after the mindu, it gets an N sound. Vandro. Vandro. Van, na. Why? Because da uses our tongue. Now, we have one more little tiny exception it's really, really, really specific. And if you never learned it, you'd be just fine. Let's look at the word rang. In rang, notice it's not a typical N, is it? Like, really say that word and feel it in your mouth. Rang. 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 What are you doing with your tongue? What letter is that? What's that letter? What is that N? It's not really an N, is it? Because N, we go na. It's not rang. You can't even do it, can you? Rang. It's this weird little sound in the back of your mouth. Rang, ng. It's this ng sound. So when we have a g after the mindu, it is pronounced ng, palang, rang. So most of the time with this mindu, we have three choices. The vast majority of words, we have three choices. We have just a simple nasal sound, which you can pretty much ignore. That's when it's attached to a vowel, right? Just like vowel like this. We have an M sound when the consonant after the mindu uses the lips to pronounce, right? And then we have an N sound when the consonant after the mindu uses the tongue. So I hope that clears that up. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments. Best of luck on your Gujarati learning journey. See you in our next lesson. Aujo, bye.